realize that this is a unique moment in history with a transformative president and a unique opportunity and window of time to actually make a difference and save this country. And most people at home, I mean, there are certainly some people that are affected by a shutdown, but the president said he's not scared of them in the past. I'm not saying that's the best way to go, but most people at home, when the government shuts down at home, they're like, oh, they still go to work the next day.
Right.
So.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sit Down, but before we get to the interview, we'd love it if you'd hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review because we love your feedback. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works and how to affect real change. Without further ado, here's the interview. Congressman Michael Cloud, welcome to the Signal Sit Down.
Well, thank you.
Of
Gonna
course.
be on with you today.
Yes, busy here in the Cannon caucus room.
A lot going on today, yeah.
A lot going on the Hill beyond this media row. We've got rescissions, we've got the big, beautiful bill, and of course, moving forward, we're going to have a fight about appropriations. You, of course, one of the only staunch conservatives on the House Appropriations Committee, so thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Sure.
Let's jump right in. Big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
Man, that was a crazy 48 hours. I was running low on sleep, and I'm just in charge of reacting to what the work you guys are doing, so I imagine you were short on sleep.
Yeah.
Talk to us about this bill. As we move forward, what can the average American family expect this bill to do for them? What metrics are you guys keeping an eye on to see whether or not this bill is going to be a success?
Sure. Yeah. There's so much that got done in this bill, and it was a good bill. And a lot of people look at the delay because there were some of us who were looking at some of the issues and working with the White House on a couple different things. We can get into that. But there was only, as you said, 40 hours between when the Senate passed their version, with changes, I might add, between the time that happened and when it came back to the House and we passed the rule for the House is when we all had an agreement, got everybody where we needed to be. So in that time, we're looking at different provisions that the Senate had changed and those kind of things, just making sure we're doing our due diligence on it. But happy to see that it happened. So many good things across the spectrum on things. American families, of course, is what matters most. Most are going to see about a $5,000 boost to their income, and child tax credits are going in there. Just wonderful things that really are going to be great for the American people. One thing that's going to help is just the tax incentives that will juice the economic of the economy. Be good for businesses that help them to innovate, to stay ahead of the curve, to have American businesses leading again on these kind of things. We want to be the innovation engine that we were known to be, and that's going to create jobs, but are also going to help families down the line. And so this is a lot of great stuff. You can talk about what's in there for the border, what's in there for the military, what's in there. So many different things that we need to get done that fit into the Make America Great Again agenda were in there. The things that there's some things we were hoping for that didn't quite get in there, but that was just because you wanted a bigger win doesn't mean it wasn't a win, and so some really good stuff. Happy to see signed into law.
So let's talk about that crazy 40 hours.
Sure.
You get this Senate package back. Of course, you guys had worked for months on this, pass it around Memorial Day, it heads to the Senate.
Yeah.
And in total, I believe that document was over 1,000 pages long.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite an omnibus where, you stack the papers on the desk and it goes all the way to the ceiling.
Right.
But it was a thick stack of paper, and there were pretty substantial changes to the Senate version. And a lot of these changes happened, of course, over the course of the negotiations, but also because the parliamentarian is ruling on things in those final hours, the language is getting changed. Certain provisions are being taken out, and then they're being put back in with different language to make sure that the Senate is following its rules.
Yeah, exactly.
How real those rules are is another question. But you guys are trying to digest all of this in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
When you first laid eyes on that Senate product, what were your thoughts? What were the achievements? What were the disappointments?
Yeah, of course, we were looking for something closer to where the House bill was. But that's not to take away for the great stuff that was in it that we discussed. With the Senate passage, there were so many changes at the last minute. As you said, there's kind of a moving ball. You're okay, what's in now? And the next hour, you're like, what's in, what's out, what's in, what's out, what's in, what's out. And that was a moving ball up to the very end, the passage of it. And so, a lot of what that 40 hours was first of all, we all had to get back to D.C. So that included the travel time of everybody getting here and flight delays and everything as well. Evaluate the bill, evaluate the changes, find out what really actually made the cut, what didn't, and what was real and what was, circulating in the X space or,
right.
So actually come through the legislation. And then we had the opportunity, some of us, to go and to talk to the president, the vice president, and his team there, understand their perspective on it. We wanted to make sure that the changes that were in the Senate weren't going to hamstrung the president's agenda in any way, and that he still had the executive authority he needed to continue moving on his priorities. And then it was coming back and working with the speaker and across the spectrum to get the votes that we needed and get everybody where they needed to be. And so, it was up all night. But it was, that's why we came here.
And one of the
work
big
for the American people.
And one of the big sticking points too for conservatives, specifically in the House, to get the House to go back to a semblance of normal order,
right,
is 72 hours to read legislation. Of course,
exactly.
That didn't happen this
exactly.
time. Some of the members wanted more time to digest and debate these policy items, but that White House meeting with President Trump, the president's team, the vice president's team, ended up being an inflection point for the trajectory of this bill. I think a lot of people before that White House meeting were confident that this was going to be something that had to be punted to the next week. After that White House meeting and this signaling from members like Chip Roy, from members like Ralph Norman, et cetera, showed that, okay, we were anticipating about 7 to 10 people to staunchly object to this, and now this number is seeming to come down, or they're leaving open the possibility for voting for this smaller win relative to a potentially bigger win that they could have had.
Right.
But you got to deal with narrow margins. You got to deal with moderates.
Yeah,
that's just a fact of political life. Take us inside that meeting. What was the president's message? What were the line items that you guys said, we're concerned about you getting hamstrung with this?
Right. And first of all, you mentioned the time. Of course, we'd love 72 hours to get there. We made it to where he had 40, and that was enough for us to be able to work through the priorities. It's funny because in those windows of time, the same people who are out there saying, read the bill, or kind of like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
We're like, we're working the issue. We all support the president's agenda. Big supporters, big fans of the president, and just grateful to God that we have him in the White House right now. I mean, just think where we could have been. But as we're looking through those, I mean, there's some changes to some of the tax provisions that we wanted to make sure had happened, specifically with some of the Medicaid provisions. And we were working to get out the waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid. If you look at what had been gone on in Medicaid, and of course, anytime you mention the word Medicaid, they're going to make a big story out of it. But the fact is that states have been abusing that in such a way to where the people it was designed to protect, the vulnerable, states were incentivized massively, 7 times more with federal dollars to get able-bodied people who should be in the workforce, able-bodied, single adults, they don't have kids at home, should be in the workforce. States were paid basically 7 times more by the federal government to have those kind of people on the roll than they were to have people to help people who are disabled. And so those are the kind of things that we're looking to fix. Wanted to make sure that any there were the loopholes that allowed illegal aliens to be getting federal tax dollars through provisions like that we wanted to make sure the White House again would be able to work on those different kind of things and do what they could from an executive standpoint to deal with those issues. And then one of the provisions that we got that hasn't gotten a lot of airtime is we got a commitment from the Speaker to put a vote for a balanced budget amendment onto the floor before September 30th. And so for us, for so many of us, we look at the $37 trillion of debt. And for me, I've always counted as this, I miss time with my family coming here, and I'm hoping that I'm able to leave my kids a better America. For me, it's kind of that trade-off, and what I'm losing in getting to go to some of their games or sports events or those kind of things that I'd love to be at as a dad, and we make as many as we can, but obviously I'm here a lot of the time, and they're back in Texas. So my hope is that the trade-off for them is that what I lose in that will be able to give them a better country.
Yeah, you get to go to their house for a barbecue on a Sunday afternoon after a Little League game for a grandkid.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
exactly. And so, constantly that's in mind. And you realize you're not going to get there in one bill, but we wanted to make sure that we're beginning to turn the corner fiscally. So, there's this didn't accomplish everything we wanted to from a fiscal standpoint, but then it did make some key improvements to the typical way DC does business. It's one of the largest. I think it is the largest savings we have on the mandatory side of spending for the American people. Again, we need to do more, and we'll continue to do more. But we got a lot of wins in this, and of course this again. It's not going to be one bill that's the fix all. You realize we're going to have to push as far as we can, get as much headway as we can, and then continue the fight as we continue to move forward.
You mentioned a vote on a balanced budget amendment by September 30, which is the day that the government's going to shut down if appropriations aren't complete, and we're going to be getting to that. What happens if you don't get that vote?
Well, I think we will. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to fund the government. I'm sure the Dems are going to do everything they can.
I'm talking about the balanced budget amendment.
The balanced
budget. This
budget
is the promise
yeah.
from the speaker.
Right.
It really is to get Republicans on record, your colleagues on the record, to say, are you for fiscal sanity or are you not?
Yeah. Well, Scott Bessent even made the note. He said, look, Freedom Caucus people, they're out there. They're doing a good thing. They're making sure that we don't forget about the fiscal cliff we're headed to. So many times in times past, I would talk to our conference and say, look, when the left's in charge, we race toward this fiscal cliff. We get in charge and we jog toward the cliff and act like that's saving the country. We've got to begin to at least walk in the right direction, and then get up to hopefully a jog, and eventually start running in the right direction. And so we still got a lot of work to do when it comes to that. I think us getting a vote and making this an issue that's in the conscience of the American people once again is really important to the process of where we continue to go. That we've got to continue to make sure that we're keeping in mind the fiscal, the future costs that our kids and our grandkids are paying for this. This isn't this, and so there becomes a moral implication to these things, in the sense of for us to continue to live off of the price that future generations will pay isn't really what this country's supposed to be about.
Congressman Eric Burleson was on the show recently and said, we went into that White House meeting and, there was a long list of notes that the White House team was taking, all the things that we were concerned about, whether that's something that can be addressed through Congress or through the administration, or how you guys can coordinate on tackling those issues, issues that the president has campaigned on, issues that won the Republicans a majority this go around in 2024. And Congressman Burleson was saying, they called us up, members up, and said, walked us through that entire list. Here's how we're going to address it. What was on that list? Do you have confidence that the White House is going to be addressing those problems?
I do have confidence that the White House will continue to address it. There's nothing that we discussed that the president was not wanting to get done. All of it was, his agenda. It was a private meeting, so I'm not going to go through all the list of the things. But I'll say that completely in line with just wanting to make sure, kind of be the rear guard for the president, to make sure that we're making sure that his agenda is advanced, and there's nothing creeping in the back door, so to speak, to hamstring the amazing work that they're doing out of the White House. And so, like I said, there's nothing that there was a point of contention or conflict on the issues. It was just more of one, making sure that we got the Senate. We did everything we could to squeeze as much juice out of the Senate on this bill, but then making sure we had a path forward on a number of the items that were important to the president.
The big divide that the American people focus on when they talk about this town is, of course, Republican versus Democrat, elephant versus donkey. But there's so many other layers of dynamics here. The most obvious, of course, at the moment is the judiciary against the executive. This is the system of checks and balances that we've talked about quite a lot. And of course, there is the balance between the legislature
and the executive as well. But inside the legislature, because of that bicameral structure of our legislature, you have House versus Senate dynamics.
Yes.
That was very much on display with the big, beautiful bill, as we've discussed. But for members of the House, I mean, is there any ill will harbored towards the Senate here with how quickly this thing moved? Because here I'm sitting, it's like, you guys spend months negotiating this.
Yeah.
The Senate gets their hands on it. John Thune says out loud, like, the Senate's going to have its imprint on it. Of course it will. But at the same time, you know, prominent senators like Leader Thune were involved in the House process, so that these were numbers that could come to the Senate to that they could work with, right? And there's a part of me that just feels like it's great that we checked the constitutional box. Revenue bills, taxation bills, start in Ways and Means. But then, when the Senate creates this product based on a House baseline, kind of, House kind of gets shoved with it, and that's one thing that I wonder if House members have any ill will about.
I don't know the ill will. Of course, we're
Might be a little intense.
always working to improve the process. I mean, if you do remember when the House bill came out in the Senate, I mean, they had all the gusto of, I mean, they were almost talking like the House bill was weak sauce, and we're going to make it stronger. We're going to find 4% of savings for the American people. And, you know, it's almost like we didn't do enough when it came to the fiscal responsibility aspect of it, and then they came back and we were left wondering. So, you know, we thought it was going to get stronger on those fronts. Yeah, and again, a lot of great stuff in it. But you know, what we thought we were getting back from the Senate and what we got back from the Senate was a little different. But you know, we'll continue to keep working on it. There's always, you know, I think of, you know, my military buds when you hear them kind of rub each other, you know, in the branches.
Army, Navy,
yeah, right. But you realize we're here to work for the American people, and you hope that you're able to serve with people wherever they are, in a committee or, you know, across the rotunda, who are doing the same.
So, obviously, budget reconciliation deals with mandatory spending.
Right.
Now we get to that discretionary spending through the appropriations process. You guys are involved. You're, of course, on the Appropriations Committee. The House, as we speak, is going about its work, trying to get these appropriations bills out of committee. Leader Thune has signaled that he wants to move on House Appropriations Committee, House Appropriations bills. That's quite a change, given how Chuck Schumer has run the Senate in years past.
Right.
And even sometimes former Leader McConnell has run the Senate in years past. But here you guys are. What can we expect with appropriations and discretionary spending? Because I think this is something that has confused the American people through this whole process.
Right.
Well, appropriations, discretionary spending is a budget thing, but budget reconciliation, this is another budget thing. So what budget thing are we actually looking at?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the difference between these two processes? What do you think Republicans can come up with?
Yeah, the appropriations process is how the government is supposed to be funded, and that's split up between 12 different bills that each have a different area of jurisdiction, of course. I know you know this, but then we work to get those through the House, and that's how it's supposed to be done. Now, what in reality too often gets done is we get to September 30th, and Congress acts like that's a date that was new, like September 30th is here. Oh my gosh, who knew we were, you know, as if the fiscal, that was, it's almost
you
like,
don't know when the fiscal year starts.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody misses
Who
New
knew
Year's Day.
September 30th was on September 30th, you know? I mean, oh my gosh, it's here again. What are we going to do? And so we end up, sadly, with a bill that punts it a few months and then punts it a few months, and then too often we end up with this big, huge, massive omnibus bill, thousands of pages long on Christmas Eve or Christmas Eve, you know? And that's a recipe to getting to 37 trillion.
Right. There's more pork in that bill than there is on your Christmas dinner table.
And what's, you know, when you talk to the appropriators, they'll say, well, you know, most of that spending is on the mandatory side. We're going to have to deal with that. And that is true. But the growth of government that continues to be on the backs of the American people, the regulations that are burdensome for businesses and families and all these different kind of things, and the swamp, and, you know, through all the DOGE efforts, all the craziness that we saw coming out is all on that discretionary side that goes to the appropriations process. And so right now we spend $2 trillion more every single year than we bring in. And so we need to fix that from a fiscal standpoint so we don't continue to dig that hole as deep. But that's also, we know as government grows, freedom contracts. And so that also has to do with right-sizing the federal government. And so sometimes, when I just got on the Appropriations Committee, you'd hear this discussion between, mandatory, that's where the real savings and fiscal change needs to happen. There's a little truth to that, but it's our job to right-size a bloated government. And so sometimes, we'd say, well, we need to cut this department, such and so. Well, if we do that, we're going to have to fire people. You're like, well, that's kind of the goal. There's too many people in this particular office, per se, that's coming up with regulations that are burdensome on the American people. Some of them are inexperienced. Some of them, as we found out, we're actually doing evil things with the taxpayers' money all over the world. So this is about getting back to the core functions of what a constitutional republic is supposed to be doing, and you do a lot of that through how you manage the checkbook, which is our number one task as Congress. So that's what we should be doing through the appropriations process. We've made a lot of headway over the last few years. The goal before was always bipartisan bills, which usually meant left or left light.
Right.
And now it's like, what's really the core functions of government? What do we really need to get the job done? And let's start with that conversation. And of course, having a president in the White House who's looking at things differently, who's not just, he's a reformer. He's not just coming in and saying, okay, we're going to do the same thing as last year, rubber stamp it with a plus up for inflation or something, So,
what is the likelihood of us actually doing appropriations the right way? The American people getting appropriations done the right way? Or are we going to be stuck with another continuing resolution? And if that does happen,
right.
what is the recourse for the American people here? Because first and foremost, you got to get the bills through the House.
Right.
That should be easy enough, right?
You would hope so, yes.
The second part of that is, now you're dealing with a filibuster
in the Senate.
Yeah. And that's where the big difference is between budget reconciliation.
I was just going to make that point. Yeah, the big difference is reconciliation. You have 50 votes in the Senate. There's some stipulations on what you can do. The appropriations process, as you mentioned, requires 60 votes, which means you bring a Democrat process. So, from our standpoint, we're passing the right of what a appropriations bill should look like.
With big cuts in them from the drafts that I've seen so far.
Yes.
You got 10, 15, 20% cuts on some of these bills.
Right. And matching the president's budget and his agenda. And so eventually this will go to a negotiation with the Senate, which the White House would be involved in, and the House and the Senate. And our point is we should be, too often we negotiate with ourselves. We pass what we think the end product should be, and then we show up to that with the negotiating table, and then it moves even further away. So we're talking about what should be, and then we'll get to the negotiating table with the strongest negotiating position possible to come out of the House and work with the White House to do what we can to make sure we get to where we need to be. If it ends up to where we end up having to have some sort of CR or some sort of package, we'll still look to find savings in that, and as we deal with the Senate. But right now the task at hand is to look at this to make sure we're walking into, hopefully we'll pass as many of these on the House as possible, and then see where that takes us after that.
You don't have many days left in session because of that big old August recess to get it done. Let's talk shutdown politics. This political brinksmanship drives this town, of course, crazy because everyone's over-caffeinated and on too little sleep, but it kind of drives the American people crazy too. It's like, why is it so hard to just do this the right way? And Democrats have a structural advantage when it comes to shutdown politics because at least they can point to and say, we're willing to spend whatever amount is necessary to keep the government open, even if that's not necessarily fiscally responsible.
Right.
Whereas Republicans are dealt a very difficult hand in playing shutdown politics, which is we need to restore fiscal sanity to the country. It's a much more long-term project. We're actually advocating for a number of spending cuts. Of course, as many people in this town have told me at this table, there's always a lobby, there's always an interest group for every single dollar that comes out of Washington, D.C., and you hear it from them. Democrats are incentivized to go forward with this type of political brinksmanship.
Yeah.
Are they going to shut down the government?
People have doubted what we've been able to do in the Republican conference, and yet at every hurdle we've been able to get through it. And that's because, coming into this year, we knew it was going to be a challenge. We knew we would have to have the debates, and we are having the debates. But that's actually what good governance looks like. It looks like having those debates and working it out and getting through the process. But ultimately, we realize that this is a unique moment in history with a transformative president and a unique opportunity and window of time to actually make a difference and save this country. And so, all of us, I think, are working to keep that perspective in the back of our minds, or at least the vast, vast majority of us. And ultimately, when it comes down to, getting the votes, we do everything we can to push this as far as we can to turn the corner where we need to go. And then we find a way to figure out how to get there. So I think that's what we're going to see happen. What that looks like, I will say, most people at home. I mean, there are certainly some people that are affected by a shutdown, but the president has said he's not scared of them in the past. I'm not saying that's the best way to go, but most people at home, when the government shuts down at home, they're like, oh, they still go to work the next day.
Right.
So
life doesn't change all that much.
Doesn't change that much for
maybe
the
they can
vast
go to the
majority
national
of,
park. But
right. We've seen administrations in the past make the worst of it, of course, and the one time happened under President Trump, they did everything they could to make things as smoothly as possible and didn't play political games with it like we see some administrations do.
Yeah, we know he's not afraid of it because the government shut down under the first Trump administration.
Right.
And I think what made that, if I'm President Trump, I'm outraged at the hand that I'm given in that situation. And the hand is, I'm going for a righteous shutdown over the immigration issue.
Right.
It's the number one reason that I got elected.
Right.
And no
Right.
one's done rat bleep for me to get across the line. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I had
Yes.
this Republican Congress that
Right.
didn't get me the border wall. They didn't get any of the stuff that,
Yeah.
that I wanted done on the immigration issue. We got a Tax Cuts and Job Act. Sure, that was great. But at the same time, that was right off the backs of Obamacare repeal failure, which was another big thing that Republicans have been promising that since before Trump was in politics.
Oh, literally voted for it, 100 times or something like that.
100%.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And then,
except when it mattered.
except when it mattered, and it couldn't get across
Yeah.
the line. And so, if I'm in his shoes, I'm outraged at the hand that I have to play. But nevertheless, it's a righteous shutdown, and I'm going to do all I can to get the border situation answered. And he ended up getting that, he forced a political conversation, or he almost forced a crisis to get that funding, come hell or high water, to start construction on that border wall and to continue construction on that border wall. But now it's a whole new ballgame. He has more than $150 billion for mass deportation. He's got the energy stuff figured
Right.
out. He's got tax cuts already made permanent. He's addressed
money for the military.
money for the
start working on
military
stuff.
already
Yeah.
addressed. All of those things he's managed to address through the big beautiful bill.
Right.
That gives him an enormous amount of leverage, because now
it
becomes very clear who the culprits are in shutting down the government if it were to come to pass.
And that was part of the calculus in the big beautiful bill, for certain, was being mindful of the leverage we were putting ourselves in down the line, and the president and his team, and working with all the Republicans. That was we knew what we were doing, in a sense, to make sure that the president had what he needed to begin to just full force go in his agenda. And so I think we'll be in a very strong position when it comes time. It'll be interesting to see. We had some of our shutdown fights in the past, or potential shutdown fights in the past. We were, I'd love to have seen us send something to the Senate under Biden when they had, the Democrat Senate, where we would have been able to say, attach the SAVE Act, for example, to a funding bill or a CR,
Right.
and give them the choice. Okay, are you really willing to shut down the government over letting illegal aliens vote? So as it comes closer, we'll see where that ends up. Those kind of discussions. But ultimately, the president's doing a good job, and the American people are seeing it. They're seeing a functioning government, maybe for the first time in quite a while. And I think we'll find a way to get where we need to be.
Last question for you, and it's somewhat on this point. In years past, Republicans have rolled over and kept the government open. Democrats have rolled over and kept the government open. But now the Democratic base is increasingly radicalized by the losses in 2024, by the fact that Trump's back in office and they think that their leadership class, Hakeem Jeffries in the House, Chuck Schumer in the Senate, aren't fighting enough for the Democratic base. And as a staunch conservative Republican, I feel for those people because I wake up every day not as mad at the Democratic Party as I am at the Republican Party because, gosh darn it, these are the people trying to represent my values, and sometimes they don't do a great job. Democrats, I wake up in the morning, I know they're going to do bad stuff. Whatever.
Right.
Liberals, I know that they're going to do bad stuff. But
they meet the bar that's set for them.
Yes, and I that's exactly right. Republicans never do. And I feel for those Democrats. And they've put a lot of pressure on leadership. They're talking about having AOC primary Chuck Schumer. They're talking about maybe this Hakeem Jeffries guy should never become Speaker of the House. Maybe we got to get somebody in there like Jasmine Crockett. Maybe Jasmine Crockett's going to go run for the Senate Texas seat, which might be a relief to a lot of the members walking around this room. But nevertheless, they want real opposition, potentially even violent opposition to what's happening across the country, whether that's mass deportations in Los Angeles or here in this town. What type of pressure does that put on Democrats in the House and Senate as we head into this fight?
Yeah, I was real surprised, honestly, to come out of November. I thought there would be at least some moderation by the Dems, maybe not in true heart, but at least in presentation when it came to how they would approach this term. But they've continued to double down, and radically so, on the same principles that lost them the hearts and minds of the American people. And so while their vitriol and vigor might be increasing, their numbers are dwindling in who's following and supporting them. And so for us, I think we just continue to do what we do, continue to put the pressure on. I think they are going to have to have some sort of identity crisis because they're losing the American people continually. And
so you're encouraging the Democratic base to continue to put pressure on these leaders. It might work out in your favor.
I mean, really, we started having these committee hearings, and they kept doubling down on all the issues, and I'm just like, if you want to continue to lose elections, I'm fine with it. That's your issue, but. And so, for us, we've got to embrace the core principle. To me, it's about the core principles this country was built on. Right now, the Republican Party is doing the best job at advancing and supporting that, and albeit imperfectly, but definitely working to advance those core principles. And the left has just gone crazy. We're not where we were a generation ago, where it's like the political discussion was, you wanted the same things for the country, and the conversation was like, what's the best way to get there? That's they're embracing socialism, Marxism, all these different things that have failed continually throughout history, and thinking maybe it'll work this time. It's just bizarre. And then to see just the crazy stuff they've embraced, that America's completely rejected when it comes to family and social structure and gender and all these different kind of things that they try to force feed on the American people. It turns out freedom is popular, and the American people are voting that way.
Yeah, I think a pretty awesome American quoted the Bible when he said, "A house divided cannot stand." That was, of course, Abe Lincoln.
Yeah.
But Congressman Michael Cloud, thank you for coming on the Signal Sit Down. Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sit Down. Before you go, be sure to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review. We not only love your feedback, but it really does help the show. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works. See you next time.